Howdy all of you delish people. I'm here today to review from Season 1, Episode 5 and 6. One thing that I want to correct that nobody corrects me about, so that's great. Because normally, a lot of times, I would end up, if I mess up one word, like, yeah, it's actually said this way, or it's actually blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, great. Nobody said anything because great. So now I can correct it here. I realized that I had said community house and I mispronounced that. It's actually colony house, as if it makes a big, massive difference, but it's still almost the same thing. Community, colony, but I wanted to correct that here because it actually did matter to try and get this correct. So within these episodes, we have kind of Jade, who we find out is also going through some stuff. He probably wouldn't recommend it. Jade is hallucinating, it seems. Hallucinating or seeing visions. And because Jade, when he was to make it to this town, was to consistently see this marker. We see that from other episodes, so this is like nothing brand new here. And so Jade was to see a zombie before that was being held by a monster before that was being held by this boulder, and he didn't really understand what that was. Now Jade, it seems in these episodes, are to go on and still be seeing visions that he's not quite understanding. And so I'm like, well, yeah, that would probably make me miserable too. So, but Jade is also going to possibly get possibly some interesting choice of which that he'll make, and I'll talk about that in the spoilers. So, one thing that I have to correct also, Boyd. Boyd, I made a connection with him and Sarah of what was kind of going on with Boyd, and I was actually incorrect about what is going on with Boyd. And really what actually is going on with Boyd is very heartbreaking, because I'm like, oh, I've already grown to like this character, and you're possibly saying that Boyd may one way or another just be written off this show, so to speak, possibly, and I'll get to that when we get into this thing called spoilers. Other than which I've just said, it's kind of interesting when you go through a show and you obviously realize that certain people are missing or gone because you've seen them in other episodes, and then you go on to this episode of like, oh yeah, hey, where is Victor here? Where is Donna? Where is this character? Where is that character? But also the thing about 6 is 6 kind of leaves us possibly at a cliffhanger. And I'm like, no! I want to see things horribly go awry. I don't want to see a ton of people getting killed and murdered and in this thing called dead. But I am just like, wait a minute. Like, I want to see how this, throws down. And so I'll just have to go on. And I want to frickin' see, like, they leave episode 6 at this, like, cliffhanger. I'm like, son of a bitch. I don't like cliffhangers on a show. But then thinking about it, it's like, well, hey, like, the episodes are out there. Yeah, I get it. But it's still, like, if the one pet peeve that I have about every show, I don't like cliffhangers whatsoever. But they have to do it. I get it. It's like, oh, well, you gotta check out the next episode. You just gotta. It's like, at least it's not a season finale cliffhanger. Then that I would just be like, yeah. I would just be so angry and upset. But anyways, so with these episodes, I feel like it's a lot of busy work. It just feels like people people need to go on and they need stuff to do, a lot of people, and to just kind of like, I don't like to use this word, especially for this, where it's like filler, but like, really, it's just a lot of busy work. But it's busy work that is actually interesting, where they're making us like realize that there's something way more unique about this town than we originally thought. So bravo to that, where it's not like they're wasting our time. They're actually just giving us also like, yeah, what about that? That doesn't make sense. Huh. Weird. So, also one thing, immediately when Boyd's grandmaster plan within these episodes, what he's thinking about doing next, I'm like, once he started to say something about grandmaster plan or something like that, when he said what his, like what he was saying, what his plan was, I was like, immediately, I'm like, I know exactly where he's going. Like, I know exactly what he's doing. And immediately what followed was then Boyd telling his plan to Kenny. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like, because, like, figuring out now that you can go on and kind of use certain things a certain way. So we're possibly going to see if Boyd is going to be able to see if something works or not. So yeah, we'll kind of see possibly how things go on further in this show. So leaving it very vague for the cryptic sense early part of here. So, but with that said, there's like, if anything, I think when I get into spoilers, it's probably going to be tough to remember everything because it's a lot of busyness. So I think I'm going to go into the big meat and like the big chunky part of the episode, and then I'm probably going to turn around and talk about all the little parts of every episode, because that'll probably be like the main, like I'm going to go and talk about the parts where I deem the most important, and then we'll just chuck in all the other stuff as we go along. So with that said, I think about this thing called time. What time would it be? Not quite sure, but I think it's about that time yet again to just go into this thing that is always dubbed spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil these episodes. So let me know how you feel about From right now. Maybe you're enjoying this show. Maybe you're just like, yeah, there's something quirky about it, or maybe you have your own thoughts about this show. From the people who did this thing called Lost. Let's go on and let's go into spoilers. So, an episode called 5. In episode 5, we have Sarah. Sarah, of course, is to have been dubbed by me to have been called a crazy person, but it seems like she is to be possibly getting these voices? These voices. But for a town like this, I can honestly say now, like, for me to say anybody is to seem like a crazy person, we should really just go on and just toss that off to the side, because there's many subtle layers of just weird things that all these characters do that are to make them very specific, or not specific, very unique characters, and Sarah seems to be one of those. So, if of course we are to remember, Sarah was to go on and have possibly a seizure of sorts, or to have possibly this collapse, maybe she was to have a dizzy spell. I've had those when I was a young person, and like I can understand that. Maybe possibly Sarah was to fall over and not realize that she like had fallen over. So she of course is to wake up at the EMT place And Christy is going and checking on her, and like it seems like everything is normal, but Christy wants to keep Sarah there overnight, just kind of check on things. Nathan is to find out what is to happen to his sister, and he is to make his way to, of course, where Sarah is. Kenny and Boyd are talking to Christy, kind of seeing what's going on, and so Christy is just saying, it's like, well, since we don't have an MRI machine, like, I don't really know. Like, I can't really tell you. And Boyd is asking Christy, it's like, well, hey, like, here's just a oddballish, like, question. He doesn't say oddball, but anyways. So, Boyd goes on and he is to question if there's something that is to be outside this world, like, would it be the same thing here? Where we find out that Boyd is to explain to us that Boyd is to have Parkinson's. And Boyd is saying that he may not have very long to live. And he's not saying this to Christy, but eventually he says this to Kenny later on. And so I think in Boyd's mind, he's thinking, it's like, well, how long do I possibly have to live in this world if this world is different? So, because it seems that Boyd is having, like, the shaking part of his hands, which I'm like, oh no. Oh no. So, and now I feel bad because I was thinking that it had something to do with the town, but no, it's just like a normal thing. I'm like, oh, that just. Anyways, so, like, we have Christy that doesn't really have an answer for Boyd, and so Boyd just leaves and he doesn't explain to her that he has what he has. So, we also have a moment where, of course, Sarah and Chrissy are talking about how Sarah is to realize that Chrissy and Kenny are to be really good, good for one another. But Chrissy used to say, it's like, well, yeah, but I'm still kind of pining away for some past lover, hoping that she is still waiting for me. So it's like, oh, okay. So they talk about that, and it's kind of nice for Chrissy, I guess, to have somebody to talk to, because I guess she doesn't talk to Kenny enough. Because Chrissy was to go on and say that Sarah and her just kind of talking about things just kind of felt really nice. I'm like, well, why doesn't, like, does Chrissy tend to, like, distance herself from this town? I don't know. Um, like, can she not really talk to Kenny about things? I don't know. We're just very unsure here because this is like the early stages of this show. So, Sarah. Sarah, of course, is to be still thinking about the fact that she may have to kill Ethan at some point because the voices that were to vainly tell her to kill the boy. So Sarah is asking Christy here that should Sarah go on, and if there is a possibility that everybody could leave out of this town by going and doing one bad thing, is Sarah should go on and do that one bad thing so they could all go home. And Chrissy is just like, well, like, I guess that would make sense to possibly do that one bad thing if it meant to do a lot of good. It's like, well, that's kind of a weird I would just be like, well, what? Like, it would really just depend on what that bad thing is. If really you were to say, like, you would have to kill everyone for them to all go home, then I don't know about that. Because, like, there is no way to perfectly say that that's really going to happen afterwards. And plus, also, like, there is no confirmation coming from anywhere of what Sarah might have to do to have everyone go home. It might not work that way. So we go on here, and so Nathan is to make his way to try and see Sarah, and Boyd and Kenny are trying to shoo him away, going on and just saying like, "Hey man, like Chrissy is very busy. Just kind of leave Sarah and Chrissy alone. Just come here the next day. You can talk to her all you want, but just not today. Like, just kind of leave her alone." So Nathan goes back to what he was doing. So after the next day, we have Sarah, who gets out of what would I guess be the hospital, and Sarah's immediately talking to Nathan, and Nathan's like, "Well, hey, maybe you should go back home. Maybe you shouldn't go on to the diner or anywhere else," because of what, of course, Sarah had told Nathan before, about the whole broken glass thing and the walking around and in a glassy room. I think Sarah should go on and just probably stay home for a while, because does it really matter if anybody goes out and does anything in this town? Like, nobody's getting like paid for anything. Nobody really, like, they'll get food, I guess, every day. We don't see any kind of like work environment going on here. But as long as, I guess, it's kind of like it's like everybody should go on and chip in. It's just the the moral thing to do. So everybody should be doing stuff with this town. So to be a part of it, to just try to feel like they're helping. So, anyways, we have Jade that's going on with this, with, of course, this radio, and so we get to the one point where Jade is trying to figure out, because he's supposedly smarter than everybody, he has to go on and insult everybody for how non-intelligent that they are. It's like, okay, Jade, like, I guess you're that person. So Jade goes on, and he is to get this radio, and he is to get this antenna from this car, and is to start to collect things so he can go on and try to have this radio to try to make this signal so they can try to talk to anybody, hopefully on the outside of this world. Outside of this world? That seems a little weird. So all of a sudden, Jade is to bump into Trudy. If you don't remember who Trudy is the one girl who, of course, is to take Julie's shirt. And then there is a whole thing about Judy getting back at Trudy by taking this girl's shirt, which never got a... They never, like, came back around about that. Maybe they will at some point. So Jade is to meet up with Trudy, and Trudy is saying to Jade, it's like, well, hey, it's too bad that you chose the town over the colony house, because I would have rocked your world, or I would have ridden you like a stallion or something like that. And immediately Jade just kind of walks away from that, and I would have been like, what the Jade? Wait a minute. Like, somebody is, like, offering, and you're just like, no, I'm just gonna walk off. Who in their right mind would just be like, no? If somebody's offering, I would not just be like, well, I'm just gonna walk away from that, whatever. If somebody's really to have just said like, well, maybe I was interested, like, well, maybe I am too. Unless you're really, of course, a person that gets really like, if somebody is to be like very weird to you about stuff, then that's the one time to just be like, no, a little too weird. Maybe Jade was weirded out. I don't know. Moving on. Because there was like one time where this one girl was just like, the way she was kind of talking to me, I was like, what now? Like, huh? Like, I don't know. It was just like, I didn't know what she wanted. Like, I don't know if it was just one of those where, like, she was just consistently just trying to, like, bug the crap out of me to see what I do, or I don't know. It was weird. So it's just like, I was like, what? It was in like this like it was in like this like after school like workout thing. So like I would see her like every day, and it would just be like this weird exchange where I'm just like, what? Like, what are you even talking about? I would just be weirded out. But anyways, like I wasn't the muscular man that I never really was. So that's great. Pushing on. So we go on here, and Jade, of course, is to eventually at some point find Jim. And it seems that Jim is to possibly, like, he's doing some electrical things, trying to understand outlets and wires and stuff like that. Because Jim, Ethan, and Tabitha decided that they're going to go on and take this wall and just start using markers and write questions on them. Of course, asking, like, did they ever survive the crash? Of course, where are they? And just a number of other questions, like possibly how does the talisman work? So on and so forth. There's just a number of things that they're really trying to question here. Because, of course, I think we had Jim. What was he doing before this? I think he was like a teacher, right? Was I wrong about that? You can correct me in the comments below. So I'm assuming or assessing that possibly we have it here where it's like the old classic like blackboard kind of like trying to like solve these questions. So Tabitha is to also try and have her little scavenger hunt to try to figure out things. So Jade and Jim are to go on, and so Jade is to have Jim like say, hey man, I need your help, come with me to this tree. They go on and they set up this radio to be tied to this tree to get this signal. And so while Jim is crawling up this tree, because I guess Jade has height vertigo, completely understand. I have height vertigo too. Like, to me, it just kind of freaks me out. Like, that's why, like, I would never really enjoy going on and watching certain films where they have these kind of, like, these, like, huge gap of things. It just weirds me out. Especially, like, there's this one movie that Joseph Gordon-Levitt was doing, where he is like doing this balancing act between the World Trade Center and whatever. I don't remember what that exactly that movie was called, but check out Joseph Gordon-Levitt's IMDb. And yeah, like while I was watching that movie, I was like freaking out. I'm like, oh my god, this like I started to watch the film, and I just saw trailers of it also, and I'm just like, like, God, this is so like I hate this. I also hate going to like IMAX theaters. It just freaking messes me up to where I'm just like, I don't enjoy this at all. It's true. Um, so Jim is to crawl up this tree, and then all of a sudden, we have Jade, who is to see this symbol upon this tree, like the symbol that he saw in this cave. That was the episode before with the whole boulder and the dead person and so on and so forth. So Jade all of a sudden is getting these driblets of blood upon his face, and Jade is starting to freak out because he's looking up at the tree to realize that there is a number of dead bodies that are to seemingly be of possibly Civil War era, because all of a sudden we have Jade who's being attacked by this man who's wearing Civil War gear, and he has this gun with this sword or this little sword thing attached to it. And so Jim is trying to back away from this guy. He's like, whoa! He's backing it up. He's backing away from Kermit the Frog style. Wow! This is wild! He's backing up Kermit style. No. Jade is trying to desperately run away from this Civil War ghost of sorts. And so Jade is to get stabbed into by this man. He's like... And so we naturally assume that Jade is now dead here. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, this isn't even nighttime. What the is going on? And then all of a sudden Jim goes and wakes like Jade up. And he's in the forest somewhere. And Jim is telling Jade, hey, like, what's going on? And so Jade is just freaking out, and he's like, you know what, I'm out of here. Like, I just need to go. So Jade is going to hook up this whole radio thing, and he's to like, hello. He's Lionel Richie now. Hello? Is it me you're looking for? No, it's not. Sorry, Jim. So Jade goes on to the diner, and he starts drawing these symbols, like he's from, God, what is it? Encounters of the Third Kind, where like the guy's put in the mountain, and he's like, this means something. Jade is like dribbling these things because he keeps seeing the symbol. And coincidentally enough, we have it where Kenny's mother, who is Tyne Chen Lu, is to know what this symbol is. And so Jade is following this girl into the back, and there's a number of this notebook thing that has a symbol in it. And Jade is like, oh my God. Like, so he has to really understand what the connection is. And he's just like, okay, like, what does this mean? What does the symbol mean? And it seems like somebody has drawn that before. So it seems that somebody possibly might have had that before. So I'm also kind of wondering if possibly certain people get gifts when they make it to the town, especially if someone is to die. Maybe, like, there is a whole, like, hey, someone was to have this gift before, now you have it, and so, like, sucks to be you, because now you're dealing with this inherited gift, some weird reasoning. Because we also have it where people are kind of questioning whether or not they were, like, chosen to come to this town. Maybe they, like... Maybe their ancestor were to, of course, possibly, like, may have been chosen from this town before. Maybe they just keep trying to go on in one way or another. Like, it's like a weird, goofy, like, family thing. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. Like, that's my brain working overtime. And it probably like, nope, nothing like that at all. Wouldn't that be a cool idea, though? To just be like, oh yeah, like, you were destined to just be on this, be at this town. That would be kind of cool. But I'm kind of wondering if this town is ever going to like expand, and then all of a sudden we're going to see that like all of a sudden like people are still like there's a lot more people that are going to get stuck at some point, and this town is going to expand and something we're gonna figure that out. But man, one thing would suck, and that would have to be to tell like a mass amount of people all at once what's all going on. Because if there's one thing that would be like, no one would of course believe what's going on in this town. Like, heck, a lot of the people that came here right away didn't believe it. So a lot of people would die in the process. So yeah, but let's push on here. So, because I still haven't gotten a lot of the big meaty parts here. So, Sarah, after leaving the hospital, is to go on and talk with the Matthews family, with the exclusion of Julie, because Julie is, of course, with Fatima going on to this kind of pond or this lake or whatever, and they're going and swimming. Because Julie is making a list of all the people that she like is to miss while she's here. And how come I'm not on that list, Julie? How come I'm not on that list? It's okay, Julie. I know. I'll eventually be on there somewhere. So Julie goes on and is to talk to Fatima, and Fatima is to have her own story about her family, and I'll get back to the Sarah stuff, but wait a second here. I just wanted to finish this up. Fatima, it seemed that she has a story where like her father was doing some shady things, which was almost to lead to Fatima's family seeing her father get killed, but all that they really get to see is that her father was dragged away, and all they got to see was the silhouette of his shadow as he was being dragged out of their house, as Fatima's mother was telling her kids to hide. So I'm like, okay, so evidently Fatima didn't know much about her like family's life, and that's interesting. But anyways, now back to Sarah. Now back to the big meat and potatoes. Sarah goes on and is meeting with the Matthew family, and so Sarah has one goal in mind, and she is to try to figure out how she can separate Ethan with the rest of his family. So Sarah is going with Ethan and Tabitha. Oh, that Tabitha, she has to kind of be with her kids, because otherwise they're going to die possibly. So Sarah at first is going with Ethan on this kind of this spin around like thing, and then Tabitha is saying like, hey, isn't that a little old and rusted, and like, hey, can't you guys go somewhere else? And so Sarah decides like, hey, there's a farm over here, we can go and see these goats and all this stuff. And so Ethan's like, well, yeah, that sounds like fun. And Tabitha's like, sure, but I'll go also. So Tabitha, Sarah, and Ethan go to this farm. And so Sarah is to tell Tabitha that, hey, like, just in case any of you guys were to ever be here around nightfall, there actually is a secret compartment where you can hide out at night if something ever happens. I'm like, when are they going to go out of their way to make it to this barn and hide here at night? Doesn't make sense, but it is what it is. So Sarah goes and shows Tabitha this hidden room, and then shoves Tabitha in it, locks it up, and then Tabitha's like, "No!" as she's smacking against this wood, desperately like, "What are you doing, Sarah? What are you doing?" So Sarah then goes on and is to meet up with Ethan, who I guess is to not hear a word of what's going on in the barn, because this kid has very selective hearing. Because Jim could hear what was going on in the barn, but Ethan can't, because he just shan't. So, all of a sudden we have Sarah who's kind of telling Ethan, like, well, like, I'm going to have to do this for the good of the people, and so on and so forth. So, all of a sudden Nathan comes in, because he knows exactly where Sarah is, oddly. Because, of course, at one point Nathan was to go on and talk to Father Khatri, and was to kind of tell the father about what's going on with Sarah. And Father Khatri like tells Nathan, it's like, you should have told me about this sooner. We gotta go on and figure this out. So Nathan makes it to Sarah, and before Sarah is to do the act of merger with Ethan, not murdering anybody, but murder. Anyways, so Nathan is to try to stop Sarah, and for his good deed that Nathan tries to do, he gets freaking cut in the throat and killed. Sorry, Nathan, R.I.P. for a character that I barely knew. So, how could you say that? We saw him for a number of episodes. Yeah, we did, but still, like, he just wasn't there enough. Like, we didn't get to know Nathan. Maybe he likes Pokemon. I don't know. Anyways, he doesn't like Pokemon. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Anyways, pushing on. So, they of course are to go on, and we have it where while Sarah is wrestling with Nathan, Ethan is to hobble off. Ethan is to meet up with Julie and all the lake people. And so Julie's kind of holding on to Ethan. And so now we have it where people in town are starting to get involved, starting to like take care of Sarah. Jim is to make his way to this barn where he finds out where his wife is and rescues her. And so they kind of scramble outside. Father Khatri is trying to chase after Sarah, but he supposedly says that his, at some point later on, he mentions that his knees are not what they used to be. I completely understand that. And so, like, Father Khatri just couldn't chase after her. But we find out that he did chase her down, and he basically just tied her up, and he's putting her in some hidden room where he's going to ask her some things, because he believes that there seems to be some other Bible that hasn't been written yet that possibly Sarah might have the pages to, so to speak. That she might know some things from these spirit people that could possibly make Sarah some kind of prophet of some kind, or some kind of channeling of this town. So, and it seems like Sarah is to put forth some effort to make Father Khatri believe that within the next episode, but we'll get to that. So, the Matthew family is to, of course, be reunited as Jim and Julie and Natasha and Ethan are hugging it out. Jim, of course, tells Julie that she did something good here, even though what exactly did she do? Not quite sure. But that kind of reunites the Matthew family for a little bit, and we get them to kind of like go and be back in the house for a very brief amount of time. so that way they can kind of like, hey, go on and bring Ethan to bed, Julie. And so with that said, I think that covers a lot of this early episode stuff. So let's cover some other things. So Boyd at one point is to have Boyd is to go on and meet his wife at her grave, Abby, because Boyd is to tell Kenny to kind of like man the station as Boyd goes off to like see his wife's grave. Boyd is mentioning that he is starting to tremor like his dad, and Boyd is realizing that he now has a possible countdown on his life, sadly. So Boyd is going on and mentioning that he might have this grandmaster plan, and so he is to tell Kenny that later. So let's get to that. So Boyd, of course, is of course doing some digging with Kenny. So of course they're gonna have to bury Nathan, and so Boyd is to tell Kenny that he has this master plan about possibly putting on this talisman, because if we've seen in past episodes, the talisman protects people. Boyd has this master plan of taking this talisman and seeing if he can go on and break through the force field that is to, of course, be this be the like the way of which for Void to possibly leave this place. Because of course they kind of would just walk into the forest and end up somewhere other in this town, and so Boyd is possibly like realizing that maybe it's just something as simple as a talisman can go on and have Boyd starting to walk and eventually be free of this town, and maybe tell anybody in the Brother what really is going on, if anybody's to really believe him, which I don't think they will. But you would think with there being a huge, massive, possibly in the real town of things, or the real life of things outside of here, you would think that there would probably be a number of missing persons cases that are all around the United States. So you would immediately think that Boyd would go on and say that, well, hey, like, how is it that you guys have a huge, massive amount of missing cases, and they're unsolved? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why haven't you guys looked into any of those? So, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So, here's also the thing. Why is it that it seems that we only have people coming to this town that are from America? No offense, but like I had that same thought process too. Like, well, like, why aren't we getting like a number of people from all parts of the world? Like, why aren't we getting like people from Russia, or people from like people from Japan or China or anywhere like that? Like, do they have their own from? Is it one of those where like they have their own variation upon like that would be cool. Like, when thinking about it, there's several different like variations of like certain shows in certain parts of the world, uh, which I kind of find fascinating. Like, there actually is like a Japanese Spider-Man that actually looks like the early stages of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It's really fun. But heaven forbid there's not a really dubbed version, so you're just watching like a subtitled version of Japanese Spider-Man, but Japanese Spider-Man is pretty cool. It looks like really, really interesting. But it like a Spider-Man that has like weirdly Zords and all this goofy stuff, like as if he's Kamen Rider. But anyways, pushing on. So Boyd. Boyd, of course, is a talk to Kenny about this idea, and Kenny is like, "Well, hey, man, if you want to go and kill yourself, go on ahead. Go on ahead and do it. Like, because more than likely we might have Boyd, who is to walk into the void of things, and he might end up in the middle of a wall. We're not sure, because that may happen. The whole teleportation of it all. So." Of him going from one part of the the town to another, as Victor is to kind of go on and say here. So Boyd is kind of unsure why exactly Kenny is the way he is, and so Boyd starts to talk to Chrissy about Kenny, and so at one point, Chrissy is telling Boyd here about Kenny that, like, you know what? I don't really think he needs like a sheriff right now. I don't think he really like. I don't think he needs a friend. I think he needs a father. And Boyd is like, oh crap! Like, well, like if you make a mistake, you're gonna live to repeat it. So, like, yeah. So really what Chrissy is saying is that Boyd should be a mentor to Kenny anyways, because Boyd is to like play some catch with Kenny, and Boyd is to break down the news to Kenny that he is having Parkinson's and that there's only so long he can really live, and that at some point, if Boyd may possibly find a way out of here, or if Boyd may go on and die, he wants Kenny to possibly like be the guy that Boyd trusts can take care of this town if something happens to Boyd, because there's always that possibility. So, but Boyd wants to play catch with Kenny while Kenny is kind of whittling these chess pieces. And so it seems that Kenny decides ultimately to go on and play catch with Boyd, and they toss it back and forth. It seems that Boyd is to be okay, like not having a glove, that he's going to catch these balls with his hands. I'm like, oh, okay, I know, like, I don't know how he would go on and do that, but hey, good on him. Like, so I'd just be so concerned that I'd be like, yeah, I would definitely want a glove. But hey, like, if Boyd can just catch up with his hand, like, that's amazing. So they're tossing this ball back and forth, and it seems that Boyd's hand is starting to shake a little bit. So they're tossing the ball back and forth, and so it seems like we have this kind of like father and son kind of moment between these two characters, and it's really nice. So with that said, I want to try to think if there's any more big events that happen here within these episodes. Uh, I feel like there's still something there, but I want to go on to the episode 6 ending. So, while at night, it seems there is one guy here that is to go on and open up these shower curtains, and it seems there is one monsterish girl that is outside, and I guess this one guy had picked flowers for her, and she's like, "Oh, these flowers, they're so nice. Like, at some point, am I going to be able to come in?" And this guy is just like, "Well, maybe." So I'm like, "No, God, these people are just so tempted." But I can probably understand with this guy, even though it's going to possibly lead to his death or other people's death. I can understand it because maybe he hasn't found a girl or anything like that in this town. Because with still there probably being a certain number of women and a certain number of guys in this town, more than likely this kid is probably just the odd guy out. Plus, also, it doesn't really seem like we have a lot of these young kids who are to really have these like they don't have school or they don't have these like events that kind of connect them together, or it's not like people are kind of pairing these kids up to just be like, you know what, like let's give these two something to do, because like if we give them this kind of thing to do, then they're gonna go on and like maybe they're gonna like find a connection, a love connection. Like I want to see that kind of happen weirdly in this show, just because like I don't know, like after we've gone on and kind of are threatened carnage and death and whatever, it's nice to just kind of see a little bit of love happen in this show. You know what I'm saying? So because it seems like we don't get enough of that, and so but let's also pull back a little bit because there's a lot more still to talk about. So Jim makes his way back home to realize that Tabitha is putting a massive hole through the wall. So Jim is talking with Tabitha, and Tabitha's in the basement just digging a hole for whatever goofy reason. And so Jim is talking to Tabitha, and Tabitha has mentioned that she was to find some unique bracelet that Tabitha had made for Jim. And he's like, "Well, it's not the same one, right?" And Tabitha's like, "No, it is the exact same one. Like this, like is to be specifically this bracelet." And Jim is like, "Wow, this is weird." So we have it where Tabitha is wanting to figure out how they're getting electricity because it doesn't make sense, and that both Jim and Tabitha are going to try to figure that out, how exactly they're getting electricity because it doesn't make sense. So because they rip through the wall and they can't figure out how they're getting electricity. Like this stuff just comes on and off. It's kind of like that one, um, that record player in the diner that keeps playing that song. And we had Boyd who was like, "Oh my god, like this is some kind of sign for this music to just come on as we're talking here." So maybe a lot of this is just like some bizarro, like like maybe there's some kind of higher power at work through this where it's some kind of world where if things don't make sense it just does. It's probably one of those kinds of worlds. At least it's not Vivarium, where we have a couple that is to go on and want to buy a house, and then all of a sudden they're seeing like 50 different houses, and they're trying to see if they can like consistently walk and walk and walk and see if they can get out of this part of town, which they never do. And so they just decide that like F it, let's go back into this house, and they find out it's the exact same house that they've been walking to, and they're like, like Vivarium is actually a really good Jesse Eisenberg movie, even though it's like very strange how at one point they're just kind of deliver this baby and like, hey, take care of it, and it's a very like peculiar baby, and so very odd movie, but like it kind of feels similar to this, and I just realized that now. So Father Kotri is to find Sarah, and he's talking to her, and so if I didn't say this before, Sarah had drawn this this symbol. And so Father Contri had realized what this symbol was, and he went to this place where all these stones were to dig out this bag of his, and was to realize what this symbol was. And he was like, oh my god, like this is some kind of like magical, like kind of vision thing here that doesn't quite make sense. So it seems that it's possible that people are going to start probably using these characters' abilities for whatever reason somewhere down the road, but we'll figure that out when we come down to it. But other than that, I think I've covered most of these episodes. There's still a lot to pull through. Still a lot going on with the show, much more so than there was earlier episodes. So that's great. It's just really hard to remember it all. And plus there's also that rush of trying to get all of it out and all of it said. So with that said, I'm just trying to think if there's anything really left here. We find out that Ethan's injury is healing much faster than it actually should, because Tabitha is putting a bandage on Ethan's leg, and Ethan is mentioning that it's like, well, yeah, like this is healing pretty quickly. To where instead of now Ethan having this crutch, he now just has this this walking stick, and that's all he really needs. And so Ethan is saying, well, maybe with all the bad in this town, maybe there also is some good. And so like, well, yeah, that must be a thing. So if Ethan can possibly heal very quickly from possibly his leg issue, is there a possibility that if anybody is going through some things, that there's also a thing that could say that people could start to heal from even the worst possible things, which is to kind of give us some hope for certain characters. So yeah, so with that said, I think that's everything that I could have possibly gone on and talked about. No boy in white in these episodes. No boy in white, no Victor, no Donna. No just rando characters that are they're just going at it in some part of a room somewhere. But maybe we'll see that somewhere in the distance, or somewhere in the other parts of weird episodes. Because I'm assuming there's still enough weird to go on somewhere in the show. So, with that said, I think I've covered most of this. Let me know if there's something that I forgot about, because I'm sure there's a billion things that I probably did. Let me know in the comments below anything else about From so far. If you're watching these episodes along with me, or if you've gone on and whatever, because maybe I just do these at a slower pace because I have other things to review and do and whatever. So I'm going to get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.